All right, guys, it's time for us to have our last lecture. I'm sorry it has to be like this, but I've been enjoying your group presentations, and you've done well in that. Hope you've enjoyed this class, or at least learned something from this class that you'll be able to use in pretty much any profession you go into. Customer service overall is important regardless of what occupation that you're in. As we finish this last section, this is about provider gap number 4. And really, provider gap number 4 is the concept of making good on your service promise. It's the idea of do you do what you say you're going to do, and how do you communicate that, and how do you figure out how to price all that so that the price communicates the level and quality of service that you want it to. So those are things that we'll talk about, and then chapter 16 kind of sort of ties everything together with the discussion about return on service quality. And we'll just talk very briefly about that one. Again, these are the chapters that your final will be over. So let me go ahead and bring up the screen share here so that you guys will be able to see my desktop. Okay. And that will enable you to follow along with the slides. All right. So as we talk about managing service promises, one of the things that we need to talk about first off is reminding ourselves what provider gap number 4 is. And it's called the communication gap. And sometimes we look at this and we think, well, why isn't provider gap number 1 called the communication gap? But this is the discussion. Remember, this comes on the company side, not the customer side. Provider gap 1 fell on the customer side with the idea of listening to what the customer wants. Provider gap number 4 is solely in the hands of the company, the external communications to the customers. Are we promising the right things? Are we over-promising? Are we telling them what it is that we can do, and then all of a sudden we can't do that? Your salesperson goes out and says, yes, we'll be able to deliver 30,000 reams of paper tomorrow, and yet your warehouse operations managers come in and say, well, we don't have 30,000 on hand. Why did you make that promise? So some of this has to do with communication within. It has to do with communication outside. But there are some unique communication challenges in the service industry. And so these will be some of the things we talk about in regards to integrating those service marketing communications. The need to coordinate those, obviously, some key communication challenges, and then 5 categories of strategies that match service promises with delivery. So here we are again at our services marketing triangle that everybody did so well on the test, putting all that together. And here we add an element called communications. You see, from the internal marketing communications perspective, we're talking about both vertical and horizontal, from the CEO down to the person who is, the salesperson going out on the sales call, and then horizontal among salespeople, so to speak, your colleagues. Over on the external marketing communication side, that's the company communicating to the customers. Are they advertising appropriately? The sales promotions, do they match what's actually being provided? Public relations, direct marketing, those things. And then down at the bottom with the interactive marketing has to do with the personal selling. Well, if you send a salesperson out without the correct information about a sales promotion, then all 3 of these areas have been affected. And we can see that. If the company, the CEOs have decided on an incentive plan, but didn't communicate that to the salespeople that actually go out to their providers, they're not going to be able to communicate that to customers. Or maybe the customers have seen the advertising even before the salesperson is able to walk through their door, and the salesperson looks like they don't know what they're doing. That happens way too often. For years, when I worked in the admissions office, one of the strategies we had in helping students to, number 1, earn more money for scholarship, and then number 2, actually get them on campus, because that's a big thing in recruiting. We would offer for them to come and take the ACT on campus, and they could kind of divide it up. It wasn't like a national setting, like where you have to sit in the classroom and wait on everybody to finish. If you were done, you could move on. ACT considered an unfair advantage, so the score didn't count nationally, but it would count for Freed-Hardeman. And we were kind of communicating to students, you can earn more money for coming to college here. You can usually, typically, people would raise their score, their composite score a little bit. And so it was considered an advantage, and people felt good. And we had them on campus, and so they were enjoying the atmosphere again. And it was a win-win for everybody, we thought. Well, then as time progressed, the academic side of things, the campus said, that's just not a good idea. It doesn't look good. Can't report it. And so they just stopped doing that. Well, for people like me, I came from that old system. I was communicating to some of our students here at church that they could go up to campus. So they were like, well, I didn't get very good scholarship. And I said, well, you can go up there and take the ACT. And then all of a sudden, one of them comes back and says they don't do that anymore. And I was like, what? So I had, and I wasn't an official employee at that time when I was telling students that recently. But when I did that, it was because I had not received the most current information, and there was really no reason to communicate with me per se, but it was just a change in policy that people like me that are unofficial recruiters had used to help students. So you can see how communications is very important. We talk about integrated communication in services. It's this idea, it's a strategy that we're trying to integrate both external and internal communication within those channels that are present to provide a consistent message to the customers ultimately. And it talks about, coordinating this across the sales and service people, print, internet, all that stuff. Everything needs to say the same thing. If you're running a special, it needs to be on your website, it needs to be in your direct marketing, it needs to be on Facebook, it needs to be, understood by all of your salespeople, your warehouse people need to be prepared for it. Across the board, everybody needs to be ready for that special sale or whatever's going on. So how's that done? Talks about advertising, presentations, service encounters. It also happens with public relations and pricing, service guarantees, customer education. And so when we talk about this, there are these 5 major approaches to overcoming these challenges that we might face. Some of the challenges that you're going to face are, there's 5 properties that we'll look at here in just a second of communication challenges you face specifically in service management, which is the idea of the intangibles, the things that you can't really, make, like a product for and give to somebody. It's a service you provide, and it's in the here and the now. It's not something in the future. You can't go back and get it again. It's perishable. It's just something that you have to do right now. These are 5 major approaches to helping overcome some of those things. And the goal, obviously, in the middle of this diagram is service delivery greater than or equal to promises. In other words, we're making good on our promises. We're walking the walk, talking the talk, and walking the walk kind of thing. So as we look at each one of these areas, the first one is we have to remember we have to approach addressing service intangibility. And the way that you can do that is any number of these. Focus on tangibles, focus on the bricks and mortar of your operation that people can connect with. Use narratives to talk about the service experience. Testimonials, you'll see companies use sometimes. Feature the service employees in that communication. Sometimes you'll see that with certain companies, they have people who work for real people who work for the company talk about how important it is to serve you. And this concept of this intangibility, here are those factors I was talking about. One is the incorporeal existence. In other words, it doesn't exist, so to speak. When I'm consulting with you, there are some tangibles like reports and diagrams and data and stuff like that I'll give to you, but for the most part, the service is an intangible. And the advertising strategy for overcoming that is obviously find some kind of physical representation. Abstractness, the idea that things are, it's hard to kind of put into terms that you can actually grasp. Financial security, that means totally different things to different people. So how do you put that in terms people will understand? And it talks about a service consumption episode, a testimonial, in other words. Another issue that you deal with in intangibility is generality. People say, I had a great experience. Well, again, what does that mean from one person to another? We talk here about system documentation, data, trying to provide, ServQual, examine those areas, show people that stuff. You can win awards. You can say we've won the J.D. Powers Customer Satisfaction Award, stuff like that. Non-searchability is a concept of intangibility that you can't preview the purchase you're going to make. This is not necessarily true with things like consulting, because typically with consulting firms or even financial firms, you're able to examine their data. You can talk to other people. You can look at listen to testimonials. You can talk to the employees beforehand. But again, this concept is the same thing. It's the idea that you have to kind of show them something. And then the mental impalpability. It's just a fun word to say right there, a fun phrase. It's the concept that quite often you don't see half, not even half, probably don't even see a third of what goes into the services that are provided for you. And you probably don't want to see them in many cases. When I started working for Freed Hardeman, and I warn everybody that starts to work for Freed Hardeman full time, and not in a you shouldn't work for them way, but a concept of you're about to see a lot of the stuff that happens behind the scenes, and it's not what you might would first expect. Some people think that working at a place like Freed Hardeman is like utopia of work environments, and it's not. Doesn't mean it's bad. I loved working at Freed Hardeman. However, as a student, we tend to build things up. We have these concepts. We have these things built up that everything is awesome all the time, and it's not. And you guys may not feel that way, but I know that I kind of, when I saw the behind the scenes stuff, it was it was kind of shocking, some of the things that I saw. Sometimes in a very good way. Just how much work is put into figuring out what your tuition ought to be, and raising tuition, or how to recruit. So much that goes into that. And the same thing when you go to a fast food restaurant. You really don't want to go through and watch them do all that stuff. You just want a good experience. But there's a lot of stuff that happens in the background. So how can you sell that to customers, that intangible part of that? You can help them to see those things. Those commercials where you see behind the scenes. They peel back the curtain, so to speak, just enough for you to understand how much work goes into the hamburger that you receive. Okay, so another thing is we have to do is we look at approaching managing service promises. And the vows made in advertising by service personnel can be somewhat of a situation at times if people are not able to deliver on it. If the company is not able to deliver on it. So some approaches they have here for dealing with that are creating a strong service brand and coordinating external communication. And so what we mean by that is creating a strong service brand is building up the service through your employees, through your advertising, through your commitment to that, and your ability to meet all those things. Those all make your brand, your service brand, really, really high. Whereas if you promise something, you can't make good on that promise, then you lose out. And you have to communicate, and then coordinate your external communication. Don't promise things that you can't deliver on. The Pizza Hut group did a good job of mentioning this. I appreciated this, that they pointed out that at the local Pizza Hut, you cannot get a calzone. They don't sell everything. They don't have a full menu, and there's always that little tiny disclaimer in those commercials. But people don't like those little tiny disclaimers, and guess what? They don't read them. So if I go to Pizza Hut in Henderson and I want a calzone, I want a calzone, and if I don't get one, I'm not happy. And I might be unhappy enough to just not come back. And you've lost a customer there, or at least you're not going to make money off of me. In this services branding model, we talk about all these things, the company's presented brand, what people see, the non-controllable external brand communications, in other words, what other people will say, reactions that other folks have. The Domino's group did a good job of talking about how Domino's is trying to control those in as much as they can, answering tweets, answering Facebook posts, trying to look at those. That reputation.com is something that is designed to help companies to capture that kind of data when it goes out into cyberspace and be able to respond to it. And then customer experiences with the company. And you see how these things mix and match and connect. what you're trying to do is find a way to create the right and appropriate type of brand awareness, and then the right and appropriate type of brand meaning, which brings your brand equity. So the concept is you want to control, in as much as it is humanly possible, all of your service aspects in regards to how your customers perceive it. And that's a pretty tall order, but as you have mentioned in some of your presentations already, the technology exists to do that in a way that it did not before. The other way that that happens is managing those service employees and making sure that they understand they are the brand. We talked about those boundary employees and the fact that your frontline employees are quite often the people that the customers deal with the most. Those people need more training, not less training, in customer service expectations and how to treat customers, how to respond in difficult situations. And quite honestly, I was reading somebody's job shadowing paper, and it was a reflection on Gano, and I can't remember right now exactly who wrote that, but they made a really good observation, and it was that there are a lot of little things that Gano could do that would help you guys to be more satisfied in your dining experience at Freed Hardman. I mean, little things, just tiny little things they could do. They don't have to redesign the whole structure, but little things they could do would make it a more pleasant experience, and that would build their brand in your eyes in regard to what they provide. So another thing is we have to learn how to manage customer expectations. And managing customer expectations means we're going to have to understand you can't promise the moon to people, so to speak. You have to make realistic promises. You do need to offer service guarantees when it is appropriate to do so. Remember, with service guarantees, you don't make one if you can't make good on it. You don't make a service guarantee. You don't create one if you're not willing to do something about it. Offer choices to people, create tiered value service offerings, and communicate the criteria and levels of service effectiveness. Making realistic promises is a concept that as we look at it, what we want to do is we want to look at what is possible in our company, obviously, and how we can meet our customers' demands, but make sure that we're doing so in a way that that we can perform our best. Remember we talked about the demand curve there and looking at that. We got to figure out what our capacity really is so that we can serve our customers like they need to be served. And the service guarantees are those are kind of those promises that are made to customers that tell them you're going to get what you want here. Another way of managing customer expectations is to offer choices. And the concept here is that you might be able to offer choices for different levels of service, and that goes along with the create tiered value service offerings. For instance, I went to I bought a pair of pants that was not hemmed. If you buy a nice enough pair of pants, by the way, that's typically how they come. That's usually, for whatever reason, a sign of a quality garment in the men's industry. I have no idea why that is, but the idea is you buy these pants that have, the waist like at a 32 or a 34 waist or 30 waist, whatever, and they're unhemmed. So you have to go and have the length, done tailored to meet your specifications. And so it's not just a patent 30 or 32 inseam length. It's catered to you. That's the concept. Well, for people like me, I don't typically buy pants like that. So when I get them, I have to ask around and say, well, where do you go to get your tailoring done? Well, one time I had somebody suggest a group in Savannah, so I went over there, and I ended up paying almost as much for the tailoring as I did for the suit, the whole suit. Now, granted, I had also had the waistline taken in a little bit because they didn't fit all that great. But when I got it back and I looked at it, one of the belt loops was missing. They had taken a belt loop off and just put it in my pants pocket and not reattached it. And I thought, well, for what I just paid, you should have given me a whole lot more than this. At least the belt loop should have been reattached. So I wasn't very happy with that. However, the next time that I had that done, I did some research on my own and found a place in Corinth. And I went down to this place, and little hole in the wall, little old lady came out, so sweet, so nice. And she did an awesome job. And even she made comment how nice the pants that I'd purchased were. It was a really nice pair of pants. I got an incredible deal on them. And she said, well, this is a really nice pair of pants. The thing is, she charges everybody the same amount, regardless of what style of pants she is working on. So my pants that I paid, good money for as a really nice pair of pants, would be willing to pay her a little bit more because I want to make sure that I get exactly what I want. Whereas a person that comes in with, let's say, I have a pair of pants for my Cub Scout uniform as a Cub Master that I wear, and I had to buy a new pair, and I need to have those hemmed. I wear those like once in a blue moon, and so I'm not really all that concerned about the hem. In fact, I hemmed them myself last time. That's how non-concerned I am about that. And so I would not want to pay the full amount that she wants to charge in that regard. So in service industry, the idea is if you create tiered level of service, the more expensive. We'll get into this with pricing as well. The more expensive, the higher value is perceived, then customers, might gravitate towards that if they really want a good service experience. Whereas you would have a lower level of service that, efficiency-minded people would be attracted to. And that can help to manage what their expectations of the service are. I had a different level of what I expected with my dress pants than with my Cub Scout pants, right? Cub Scout pants, not that big a deal. It's just a basic seam that you're putting in, a basic hem. With my really nice pair of pants, man, I want those to look sharp. I want the cuff on them, and that's a little extra work. I want those to look sharp. I don't want to just put a couple of stitches in them. I want them to look nice. So you can do that. And the other thing is communicate to your customers that you have different levels of service. And so you might, signal to customers value, such as in the airline industry, you have different sections in the airplane, right? And first class, they get little extra perks. And the mission trip we took, I kind of thought, is first class really worth it? Because all they got was like a little bit bigger seat, and they also got, I think they got like, I don't know, maybe an extra round of drinks or something, and like I don't even think they got hot towels on this flight that we were on. So is it really worth it? Well, for some customers, it is worth it to not have to sit in a 3-row seat, maybe just a 2-row seat with a couple of extra inches of room. For them, it's worth it, right? Communicate that you have those different levels, gold members, things like that. And people will invest in those. And that helps them too, by the way, to manage their expectations. I didn't expect to get a hot towel sitting in economy class. I didn't expect to get like 5 rounds of drinks of whatever I wanted. I didn't expect that because I didn't pay for that. And that's how some of the way that you can manage customer expectations. And we talked about this a little bit, the idea of customer education. And the purpose of this, as far as the communication gap is concerned, is that we're get more specific with this now, and that is we need to prepare customers for the service process. Concept here is, whose responsibility is it to make sure that customers fulfill their roles properly? Whose job is that? Is that the job of the company or the customers themselves? It's a good question. I don't know that everybody's really got that figured out. But one of the things you can do is, especially even in self-service technologies, again, make it simple, make it clear, and you're going to have the second language option. Those are 3 vital things for like self-service technologies. Signage. When you go into a bank and there's a sign that says, please wait here until the next teller is available, you have communicated to me what the process is. I know that I wait there. Even by the queue setup, I understand if there's 1 line or 4 lines. Visible, tangible cues can help your customers figure out what the service process is. You also need to confirm performance to standards and expectations. What that means is that you don't uh, you fall short of explaining to your customers that you actually have done something. I think of programs like these behind the scenes PC programs like PCmatic that work in the background on your computer. Uh, how do you even know those things are really working? Well, typically there's some little toolbar or something that pops up every once in a while that says, "Hey, by the way, we protected you from 5 viruses today," right? And that's not because you needed to know that you were protected from 5 viruses. It's that you need to know that PCmatic that you paid $50 for on your computer is actually working, right? Or at least it says it's working. I'd be interested to see if that information is actually valid that pops up. But anyway, the concept is you want to confirm that. You want to prove that you're actually doing the work. In a consulting situation, this would be sending emails to talk about progress, sending reports along the way as they are finished, with the understanding there will be a complete and final report, touching base with people, telling them where you are in the process, requesting information from them because you need to finish up something. All of that is included in confirming your performance standards. But then also you need to clarify expectations after the sale. So like in consulting, when you make the final presentation, is that it? Is that all you got for me? It's usually followed with, some type of follow-up. Okay, well, how can we help you here? Have you implemented this? Have you found that to be effective? Is there something else we can do for you? And so it's the idea of you want to clarify expectations after the sale. Can you contact me after this session is done, or don't call me at all ever? We had a sound system installed at the church recently, and one of the things that it says is included in the price that we paid of install is training. We didn't get much training. And so I talked to the guy about that, the business owner about that, who happens to do a lot of the installing as well. It's a smaller company. He was very kind. He said, "Look, you can call me, email me, or text me anytime with any questions, regardless of how long it's been since we have installed." I like that. There wasn't a great deal of training. There was a lot of stuff we just didn't even need to mess with. They will come back and service anything if we need it ever. And they're a great company to work with. The install was great. All that stuff was really, really good. That was one area that was lacking. But again, I didn't understand what training meant. He probably should have been a little more clear on that, in that training for me doesn't mean we're going to sit down and go through a formal session for you. That's what it means for me in my business mindset. What he meant was anytime you need that help, we're going to be there. So he would better reference that as referral service or something like that later on. But you need to make sure that you're clear with customers and what you're going to provide. And then all these is approaching, managing the internal communication part of this. And that is we talked about that effective vertical communication, making sure that the right people have the right info. It needs to flow down through emails, through sales material. By the way, if you expect your salespeople to go out and sell something and they've not first seen what it is that you're going to sell, they're not going to do a good job. All right. If there's some marketing promotional material of some sort that you're going to send out to customers, your employees need to see that first. They need to know that's coming. They need to be aware of it, and not the day that it's released. They need to be a part of seeing that come to fruition as early in the process as they can. But you need to keep your employees informed. Employees hate to be surprised by customers. It makes them look stupid. And they don't want to look stupid. They want to be knowledgeable, even if they're working, the front line at a fast food place. One of the worst things that can happen is, oh, do we even sell that? Do we have that on the menu? All right, nobody wants to feel that way. You need to also make sure you're communicating horizontally across those boundaries. Like I said, the paper salesman needs to know that the warehouse operations manager can make good on the promise of 30,000 reams of paper, and that he's not making a promise they can't fulfill. Typically, one of the ways you take care of this, by the way, is to have team meetings where you will get people from totally different parts of the company to get together once a week, once a quarter, once every couple of weeks, whatever. And those folks are able to talk about the things that they are able to do or have shortages on. In the restaurant industry, if you're a server, you call it 86 something. What that means is that we no longer have any of that. If we're selling prime rib and we no longer have any prime rib that's cooked to a medium rate, then when people ask for medium prime rib, you say, I'm sorry, we don't have that anymore. You hate as a server to take somebody's order, go back to the kitchen, and find out that something's just been 86. It's just been taken off the menu. So then you have to go back out, and the customer's not happy. If you can address that at the beginning, saying, "Oh, and by the way, I want to let you know while you're looking at your menus that we no longer have any medium prime rib. We do have well done. We do have rare, medium well, stuff like that. But we do not have medium tonight. I apologize for that inconvenience." You've informed your customers. Because you've been informed, they can make a more accurate decision earlier on, right? That helps them, it helps you. You need to also sell the brand inside the company. We talked about this earlier in some of our studies. You don't just sell your brand to your customers. You consider your employees to be kind of internal customers in your company. And so you also have to, sell those things to your employees. And then one of the other things they talk about is create effective and upward communication. The concept here is obviously of creating a way for those frontline employees, those boundary line employees, to be able to communicate up the chain and know that it's going to go somewhere and somebody's going to do something with it to where things can happen. I was at a Schlotsky's Deli one time. You guys may not even know what those are. I used to love eating there. But at this Schlotsky's Deli I went into in Dallas, Texas, there was a young lady there that had created her own sandwich. And they asked me, would you like to try her sandwich? And I said, well, sure, yeah. And so I tried her sandwich. And then when I completed the survey afterwards, I mentioned the girl's name specifically and talked about the sandwich that she had designed and how good it was. I don't know whatever came of that, but I thought that was really cool that an employee had taken that initiative. The store had gotten behind her on that, and they were offering that as a menu option. And it was easy to price it because it was just a few extra things on it. It wasn't any big deal, but it was really good. And it showed creativity. And my hope is that as I communicated as a customer, that went somewhere that people noticed and said, hey, let's go talk to this person. She's got some creative sense about her. Let's see if this sandwich is worth putting on the menu. Something like that. But employees need to know that things are going to go up the chain. Customers need to know that things are going to go up the chain, and that somebody that can do something about it is going to hear about it. And then again, this is a no-brainer. The back office stuff, support personnel, external customers, all that stuff, that has to work in a way that you can measure. As far as it has to interact well, and that can be very, very difficult. A concept that we had in the admissions office when I was working there was the phrase, everybody's a recruiter. It doesn't matter who you were, everybody's a recruiter. If you pick up the phone and you were a student worker, you're a recruiter. If you were the secretary, you're a recruiter. If you're a database entry person, you are a recruiter. In other words, the mindset is everybody's on the same page trying to speak the same language about anything and everything. We were trying to take care of customers, potential students, as they would call, or their parents even, and take care of their issues. And that meant that the left hand had to know what the right hand was doing. If they called about a financial aid matter and we didn't really know, we needed to make sure we got them to the people that could answer their questions. We knew which financial aid counselor they were assigned to and where they were in that process. And so we tried to communicate as much as we could to each other within those departments so that we looked like we had our act together. And the same is true today. It's the purpose of the one-stop shop. You can go one place and take care of all those things. And that's the idea of creating cross-functional teams. One of the things we did when I was working in the admissions office was the concept of we went through financial aid training every year from the financial aid office there. They would talk about changes to the Stafford loan to subsidized and unsubsidized. They would talk about key loans. They would talk about grants. They would talk about the Tennessee Promise. They would talk about the Hope Scholarship. The Tennessee Promise Scholarship is for community college, but for the Hope Scholarship, the changes and those things, they tried to keep us up to date on that. So when students would ask us as we were out at college fairs, we knew how to answer. Other colleges, I would notice, they say, well, you'll have to talk to our financial aid people. We don't know anything about that. That's not good service. Good service is whatever question you ask me, I can answer it to a degree, and whatever I can't answer, I know exactly who to tell you to talk to. I don't just say call the financial aid office. I say, here's the number. This is the person you talk to. They will take care of you. All right? Makes a difference. All right, so here's some best practices for closing that communication gap. We looked at those 5 things. Employ that integrated service marketing communication strategy around says everything and everyone that sends a message or a signal. That's everybody. Everybody in your office is a recruiter. Everybody in your office is a paper salesman. Everybody in your office is some type of service personnel, and they understand that. They get that. Manage those customer expectations effectively through the experience that customers have, how you communicate to them, and then develop mechanisms for internal communication to make sure you don't overpromise and that you actually can deliver on your promise. Know that if your mechanics cannot possibly perform the number of oil changes that you've guaranteed within a 30-minute window, then you need to revisit that. Or you need to make sure the customers understand that it's not a 30-minute guarantee from the time they pull in the driveway, that it's a 30-minute guarantee from the time their car goes in the bay. They need to understand that. That's not reasonable to just expect customers to assume that 30 minutes begins when I pull in the parking lot. That's what customers are going to think. You have to communicate to them and help them understand all that. All right, so as we look at chapter 15, we move over to the area of pricing services. How do you price services? How do you charge? There's an interesting little thing in the beginning of this this section in your book where they ask you how would you value these different things like a dental checkup, a root canal, braces. Do you really know? Could you say right now that you know absolutely positively a dollar amount for each one of those things? And I'll be honest, I looked at it and I said, I don't know. I mean, I know what I pay to get my teeth cleaned, but braces, got no idea, man. I know our insurance covers some of that. So my wife is a teacher and we have dental insurance. Man, beyond that, I don't know. So it's not easy. It's not easy for customers, not easy for the consumers to figure that out. Well, then that kind of puts the burden back on you as the manager or as the owner of the business to figure that out. So how do you approach that? And then pricing strategies that link these 4 value definitions. We'll talk about those more in just a minute. And this is the concept that I just finished talking about, is that customers often have no idea what they should be paying for a service. The service variability, in other words, what's available out there and different levels of all that stuff, they have limited knowledge of that. Providers sometimes, by the way, will not estimate their costs or their prices. Excuse me, their prices. The Progressive commercials are hilarious with Flow, but they serve a purpose. They show you that we're willing to show you what all the other competitors will charge along with us. And that's not something that some insurance companies are willing to do. They don't want to give you a quote because they want to make you jump through hoops before they do that. You also need to understand that what I need and what you need might be 2 separate things. Our individual needs are going to vary. Therefore, it's hard for us to come up with the right price. If I need a much more extensive mechanical work done to my car, and you just need an oil change, then what? How are we supposed to decide? Those are 2 totally different services there. One is just an oil change. The other one is major work. Well, how am I supposed to figure out what I should be charging or what I should be charged as a consumer? It can be difficult. And then collecting price information by customers is difficult. If you expect them to call 5 or 6 different shops to get quotes on how much it costs to get your hair cut, that's going to be really difficult. People are not going to do that. Typically with hair salons, they just kind of show up, or word of mouth is the way that works for a lot of guys. Hey, where do you get your hair cut? It looks decent. They didn't chop it all off. It's $10 over here. Sherman does it. Oh, okay, well, I'm going to go see them. And that's pretty much how that works. They're not going to call around and get prices. Sometimes those prices are not visible, and that's the fault. That strictly falls to the company. if you're not clearly showing your price structure to people, you're not doing a major part of your job. A major part. You need to be clear about how much it's going to cost. I was in the vet's office here in Selmer not long ago. Brought my little dog. She's having some issues with her hind leg. She's apparently she has a ligament tear. And as I was sitting there, there was a lady that said she was at the counter paying. She'd had to have one of her puppies euthanized. It had parvo. That was really, really sad. I hated that for her. But on top of that stress, by the way, she got shocked with a bill of like $120. And she said, well, it's never cost that much before. Where did that come from? So she had to go back and talk to the vet about what had happened. They had not been clear that with euthanization, they were now going to require a full examination. Well, that raises the price significantly when you do a full examination. Why they would need to do that, I don't know. But anyway, they wanted to do that. That had to become a new policy. Had not been communicated to this lady. She was not happy. Now, she was already emotional, and now the price structure was not clear. I don't think she'll be back there. By the way, she's a breeder. So vets love those people because they're in there all the time. This lady probably won't be back. She was that upset. And that can spell trouble for you. You also have to realize in pricing that pricing is not all about the actual sticker price. It also is about considering what the customer gives up in their time, how they search, the convenience of what you offer, and those psychological costs. Like I talked about with this lady, she had spent all that time. You know, she's a breeder. She doesn't have one puppy. She's probably got 50 of them that she's taking care of at one time at different levels. She brings one in for a parvo situation, and it dies. She was attached to that dog. It was evident. But number two, she's lost money on that dog. She fed it. It was at a certain age, and now it's gone. She's lost money. So there's all this other stuff in addition to money, especially the psychological effect of losing an animal that you care for greatly impacts that. Then she has to drive all the way down there only to find out that she doesn't have enough money with her. So then she has to go back out to an ATM and then come back and pay cash because she doesn't do checks. She doesn't work that way. She doesn't use a debit card. That's part of her choice. But we have to realize the vet's office has some responsibility for that. They were not clear. By the way, when I walk in that office, there is no price structure evident anywhere in that office. I had no idea what I was going to pay for Bella when I took her in the other day to have her examined. Had no idea what I was going to pay. I was willing to pay whatever because I love the dog, right? But there comes a point where that becomes ridiculous, and we have to understand that. You need to be clear with people. One of the things that we often talk about in service is that if you pay more, then if you charge more, customers think that the value is greater. The quality of the service is going to be better. In consulting firms, this concept is the idea that, well, if we underprice ourselves, nobody will take us serious because they don't think we're going to do a good job. If we overprice ourselves, nobody can afford us. So we'll charge as much as humanly possible so that we look like we know what we're talking about, and people will want to use our services. Sometimes that works, but for the most part, it's going to be word of mouth and what references you can get and those kind of things that really determine the value of what you're offering. And you're going to have to figure out how to determine the monetary value on that quality. Again, this is the idea. If you're paying less as consumers with products, tangible things, if we pay less money, we expect for it, we don't expect it to have all the bells and whistles. When we pay a premium amount, we expect it to have all the bells and whistles. Well, kind of the same thing happens in the service industry. So here are the three basic marketing price structures. You've probably already studied these in marketing, principles of marketing. At least I hope you have. You've seen these before, but we're going to look at them very quickly in regards to service industry. So the cost-based approach, the challenges for that in service industry is you don't always really know what your costs are. If you're a consultant, you might know what an airline ticket is going to cost this month to fly from Pennsylvania to Jackson, Tennessee. But with the fluctuation in fuel prices and those things, that might change from one month to the next. And so the issue is that somewhere down the road, it's going to be harder to calculate those things. You're going to have to kind of average that, or just guesstimate for the most part. Also, labor costs are hard to determine because the service industry is mostly about your labor, right? It's about how much time people spend on this, which is sometimes hard to calculate. And then the cost may not equal the value that customers perceive the services are worth. Yikes. Okay. Again, that goes to the discussion of the background stuff. What happens behind the scenes? The below the line of invisibility with the service, the service matrix that we've put together, the service process map that we put together. The idea is that customers may not understand what all those costs are. And so you may have to do a better job of explaining those. But those are the challenges about saying, well, here's what it costs. We want to make X percentage above cost, so here's what we're going to charge. Well, if I don't really know what my costs are, I got an issue there, right? So then we look at it, another one, and that is competition-based. And it's the idea that we'll kind of look at what the competitors charge, and then we'll charge something similar, maybe a little bit less, a little bit more, if we think we're better than they are, if we do provide things they don't provide, or we're going to provide a little less because we're just starting out. This can be especially dangerous for small firms. They point this out in your textbook because you're kind of leaving yourself out there, equating yourself with other people who might be established in the industry. And if you don't have a couple of really good first goes at your customers, you can be doomed with that. It's hard also even to compete because obviously bigger firms will have more resources and can defray that cost a little bit more, whereas you're not able to do that. So you might need to actually charge a little bit more. But if you do that as a competitor, make sure that if you're a small firm, make sure you give the extra time and attention that your clients would want to have from a smaller firm, right? It's part of why you guys chose a smaller university. You're getting a good education, at least I hope you feel like you're getting a good education. You are getting the same degree as many of your friends that go to state schools, but part of the reason you chose this institution against other competitors is because you knew you would receive some special connection with faculty and other students and even staff members on campus that you might not get other places. And so it was something that you were willing to pay a little bit more money for, so you could have that. And to be in an environment where, obviously Christ is the center of everything we do, regardless of your major, that we really care about you, and not just you, but your soul. And hopefully you feel that as well. So the last one is demand-based. And this one is the concept that you will set your price to adjust and reflect the value of the non-monetary cost. So, like information on that service is going to cost is less available. Make sure there's not another one. Okay, good. I want to make sure there wasn't one there. Information on service costs is less available to customers, and price may not be a central factor. So, demand-based is this concept that we're looking at pricing it. What's the demand for this? If it's up, we're obviously charging more. Down, we're charging less. But it's going to reflect the value of non-monetary costs. In other words, the time and the convenience factors. That's one of the challenges for the service industry, is that it has to factor that, the inconvenience. Even if you're in consulting work and you're trying to figure out how to price it, your visits will be somewhat inconvenient from time to time for your clients. Your calls, your emails, because you're going to be asking them to participate. You're going to be asking them for data. You're going to be doing research outside of that, obviously, but if you're doing research to help them with cost efficiency, I mean, you're going to be bugging them. And that may not, that's a fine line there of figuring out how much time to spend with them. But the concept here in pricing is, well, if I'm a major inconvenience, then I'm going to have to charge less so that they'll still want the service. And that can be a challenge. So how does it relate to service value? That service value is the concept of it's this they call it a mental trade-off. It's the idea that um, what the customer had perceived and what they have to sacrifice, do they get what they've sacrificed for? In other words, I stood in line for 30 minutes for this. You ever said that before? If you've ever been to an amusement park and you're watching this ride and you're like, man, that's a really fast ride. I'm in line for 2 hours to ride a 15-second ride. I'm not sure I'm going to do that again. All right. So the idea is, how do you figure out what that service value is? Well, obviously, you're staying in line for 2 hours. It must have been worth it, or you would not have stood in line. So again, this can include the monetary, non-monetary sources of sacrifice, and it may mean different things to different people. For somebody, that 15-second thrill ride is what they've been dreaming about all year long. They will stand in line for 2 hours, time after time that day, in order to ride that ride. But again, as we talk about pricing, one of the strategies you might can employ here is a tiered level of service. For somebody that's really gung-ho about riding that particular ride and other rides in the amusement park, they might pay a premium fee to be able to skip ahead in that line, right? So, therefore, their perceived value is going to be, I will pay more money to do more of what I want to do in a shorter amount of time. I'll pay the money to do that. And you could even have higher levels of that where they get to maybe add a couple of dollars here and there and choose very specific rides that day that they're going to ride that way. So we talk about these four customer definitions of value, and one is that value is low price. Another one is value everything. Value is everything I want in a service. Value is all that I get for all that I give, and value is the quality I get for the price I pay. Different pricing strategies in terms of what service value is to consumers. And so if value is low price to your consumers, if that's what they consider to be value in the service that you're offering, some of the strategies here are offering discounts, right? Okay. JCPenney several years ago used to use this strategy with coupons. But when JCPenney hired a new CEO, I believe that person came from, they might have come from Gap or from Old Navy, one of those connected companies. Anyway, I think what happened was this person came in and said, okay, we're not going to do coupons anymore. We're just going to lower the prices of everything and communicate that to customers, and they'll be on board with that. And they weren't. They didn't like it. They wanted to feel like that they were getting some kind of deal, right? And so the discounting became a very big deal for JCPenney shoppers. When you took that away, they didn't like it. Now, the prices were lower across the board. That was proven. They were paying less money. They didn't feel like they were paying less money. Weird, huh? But they didn't. People don't do math. I'll just be honest. Honestly, one of the things you can learn from this course is people don't do math. You got to tell them. They don't know how to figure that stuff. They won't do the math. You need to do it for them or offer discounts. Help them to understand that things are better this particular way. JCPenney did not do a good job of that. Belk seized on that, one of their competitors, started offering coupons left and right to people like me. And guess where I shop? Belk. Guess where I used to shop? JCPenney. I shop at Belk. I get different values or different things, different coupons, and I'm a bargain shopper like that. So the other thing about low price is odd pricing, which is where you charge like $2.98 for something instead of $3. Even though it's really worth $3, you shave a couple of pennies off here and there so that people feel like they're getting some kind of deal. The synchrono pricing, is that what I said? Yes, synchrono pricing is the idea that you change the pricing as you need to in order to kind of control demand for your product, such as like use things like place differentials, front row at a concert. Those seats cost more than seats in other locations for the concert. Time differentials. If value is low price, you offer deals for people. You can make free phone calls from 11 p.m. to 1 a.m. or whatever. quantity differentials. If you purchase in volume, then you'll get a little bit better deal. And then differentials as incentives, lower prices for new clients that come in, and you try to get them there, and then later on you kind of up the price a little bit, as far as there was an introductory price and now you're paying full price, but you got people through the door and got them to believe in it because value is low price for them. Well, that means you're going to have to do something at the beginning to attract them, and that means you may have to reduce the price at the beginning. Penetration pricing is the idea of you introduce a new service at a very, very discounted rate to attract customers. And sometimes, by the way, this is a strategy to put your competitors out of business. When Movie Gallery, I think that's what it's called, in Henderson moved in, one of those movie rental places, they rented all of their movies, brand new releases, everything, for 99 cents for like 6 months. They do that in order to put out of business all their competitors. They figured out somewhere or another that if they can do that for 6 months, it will get rid of most of the competition in the area. Because after half a year, most of the mom and pop businesses cannot continue to function because they're selling the same rental for $2.99. No competition. People are going to go to Movie Gallery, and they'll try to put the locals out of business. It can help, and it's a strategy to use when customers consider value to be low price. Now, when value is something the customer defines as everything I want in a service, then there are a couple of different options here. And one is to use prestige pricing, where you charge a higher amount of money or a larger amount of money for luxury ends of the business, and then skimming prices, where you introduce a service at a high price. Things like to make it seem like it's the answer to all your problems. Like when Botox first came out, those injections, astronomically expensive for injecting Botox into people's cheeks and eyebrows and all this other stuff. But the idea was it was the answer to all your problems, right? It was a premium service that only the elite could afford. And if you could scrape up enough money, then you could be among the elite. Laser surgery for eyes, eye corrective surgery, laser surgery, still at a pretty high premium. But it's the idea of I never have to wear contacts or glasses again. I wish I could afford that. I would pay it. But the concept is when customers are defining value as the fact that I get what I want, you can charge what you want. And in fact, setting that price communicates in part the fact that it is something that not everybody will have access to, and you're setting up a certain clientele base. And that may be what you need to do. Another one is that value is the quality that I get for the price that I pay. And this is the concept of things like value pricing. This deals with bundling. There's another one as well. The other one deals with bundling as well. And it's the idea that I can put lots of services together and give you a discounted rate for all those services as a whole. If you're spraying my house for bugs, but you can also do termite, and you can do other, like pest controls, like spraying my yard for pests, then you put all those things together and give me a bundle of that. That's value pricing. I feel like I am getting my money's worth. Market segmentation is the concept of like creating different groups of customers that will pay different amounts of money. Like when Regions first came to Henderson, they offered free checking for any students, any college students. Absolutely, they called it absolutely free checking. There was no minimum balance you had to keep. There was no, well, I think there was a minimum balance of like $5, but it just encouraged you to open accounts. Well, now Regions has changed a lot of that stuff. That's how I started. Well, now I just have a regular Regions account. I don't have a student account anymore. Well, why not? Well, because I'm not a student. But number two, they didn't do that. They're not doing that now for people like me. So the idea was they kind of got us in that direction and then held on to us. But now they've changed a lot of things for adding different fees for different things. And a lot of folks are not happy about it. They don't feel like they're getting the quality service for the price they're paying. And so they're taking their business elsewhere. And that's something they need to definitely consider. And the last one is we'll look at is the pricing strategy. Is that when the customer defines value, is that value is all that I get for all that I give. And the concept here is uh, the idea of you can use price framing, which is where you kind of organize price information for customers so they know how to view it. This kind of goes back to what Progressive does. You plug in your information and they tell you what other competitors are going to charge along with what Progressive charges. You might also need to do some comparisons as far as this is what they offer at $20, this is what we offer at $20. Those are good ways for people, for consumers who see these things that way. Price bundling, again, throwing together a lot of different services that you can offer and giving people a value on that. Complementary pricing. This is the concept of using things like captive pricing, where they offer like a base service, and then there are other services they can provide as well. So, like we have Dish, and we're starting to get things. We needed to get internet at the house, and we can't get cable, we can't get DSL, so we have to use satellite internet, which is good. What we have is good. It's just frustrating. But anyway, we have Dish satellite, and we wanted to get Dish internet service because we could get a price break. Well, when we called, they didn't offer it in our area. Well, that frustrated me, so I went to Exceed, which is a whole nother company, and now I'm getting literature in the mail that says, "Hey, we want you to sign up for Dish Network internet, satellite internet." And I'm like, "Where were you like a year and a half ago when I was looking for this stuff?" Now I'm locked into a contract with Exceed. I'm not very happy about that. But in complimentary pricing, they'll give you a $10 discount per month on the Dish internet because you already have Dish service. Well, that's complimentary pricing. And then the results-based pricing is the idea that you're not really sure what the outcome is going to be. That's it's terrible to say that, but you're not real positive what the outcome is going to be. And so the most relevant concept for pricing in the mind of the consumer is that end result. Translation, when I go to see our tax accountant, at the end of the day, I want to know that he has done my taxes correctly, and I'm willing to pay the $100 that he charges per hour to make sure that my taxes are done appropriately, because ministers' taxes are very hard to do, very complicated, and we're subject to auditing sometimes more often than others are, or at least it feels that way, because we're kind of self-employed but not self-employed. Our taxes are kind of complicated. So we want to make sure, and the other thing that my tax accountant promises as a guarantee is that if I am audited, he'll be there. He'll provide the documentation. He'll be there to argue with the IRS, and then I'll pay him for that as well. But he'll be there. He'll stand behind his work. Whatever decisions he makes in what he puts in on the 1040s and Schedule Cs and all that stuff that he's got to fill out for me, he'll stand behind that. And so I need to know that. That makes sure that I'm not just getting my taxes done, I'm getting tax services in case I get audited. And so those are those four pricing strategies. Now, what do those look like in terms of reality? The concept is you are going to have to determine through surveying, through examining what your competitors do, through thinking about what your customer base is going to look like, and determining which one of these pricing strategies you ought to use. And sometimes, by the way, you may have to use a conglomeration of all of them at differing levels with different people at different times, or at least understanding how your customers are going to react to the prices that you are charging. So those are all parts of that. And this last part is, as we leave that behind, as we come to the very last one, is the service and the bottom line. And the big thing here is service and profitability. What is there? That's the question. Is there a direct relationship between service quality and profits? And there have been so many studies. We talked about the ACSI, the American Consumer Service Index, that show that companies that consistently score high in terms of customer satisfaction are more profitable. And there's also a exhibit, I think it's exhibit 16.1 in your book, that demonstrates for you the fact that it is, yeah, it's exhibit 16.1 if you want to look at that, how serious service quality is to customers, excuse me, in direct proportion to return on investment. That when there's a 1% increase in satisfaction, there's about a 2.3% increase in return on investment. But when there's a 1% drop in satisfaction, you lose almost or more than twice the amount. So you are negative 5% on your return on investment if your customer satisfaction drops 1%. So while we would argue that service quality might only give an incremental increase to your return on the investments that are made, if you don't do it, it's really going to cost you. That's the concept there. If you look at Exhibit 6.1, it's asymmetrical. It's really going to cost you if you don't focus in on it and do something about it. At the very beginning of the chapter, they talk about return on service quality. And this is something that's somewhat new. It's the concept that you really do receive a return. Just like return on investments, when you invest in things, you expect a return. There is some way to measure return on service quality. And the authors mention these 4 aspects that companies ought to consider in thinking about, should we really invest in service quality, in increasing service quality. One of those is that service quality is an investment, that you're going to see a return on that with your frontline employees. If you train them with better skills on how to deal with difficult customers, customers are going to be more satisfied. Whether it may not be that particular customer, but watching a person handle that and handle it well builds confidence in that company, okay, and with other customers. Service quality, the second one, is efforts must be financially accountable. You have to figure out some way to justify that you're sending your salespeople to some kind of conference on learning how to be more empathetic in their sales process. You can't just say, well, I guess we're going to spend that money on that. Have you seen any connection, greater connection, better service, better sales as a result of having sent your employees to that? Or was it just, well, I guess we tried it and it didn't work? Well, that's not going to work for very long. Another question to ask is it possible to spend too much on service quality? Absolutely, yes. Remember, we talked about this, that we looked at importance performance matrix, and that is what's the most important thing we need to be looking at in regards to what we can control and what's important and how we perceive that and what we're going to do about that and how that leads to productivity. And then what are some things that just really, quite honestly, don't matter. If something doesn't matter to consumers and you find that out as you've surveyed them, as you've gone through ServQual and you're looking at, well, they don't really care about this particular aspect, well, then don't spend a bunch of money fixing that, right? But if you find out from customers over and over and over again that they don't like this aspect of your service, do something about it. Even if you have to take money away from another area, do something about it. Because it is possible to spend too much on service quality that's pointless. Make sure that it has a reason. Make sure that it's accountable, so to speak, for the reason that you're doing it. That you hold yourself accountable for why you're going to make that decision. And then the other thing is to remember that not all service quality expenditures are equally valid. Some companies think that you can solve everything by just discounting prices, that you can solve every issue by just offering incentives, that you can solve every issue by just an advertising campaign. And quite honestly, that's just not true. Number one, you're not really addressing the problem quite often. If you're just trying to, do external communication, but the problem internally still exists, you got to deal with that. You got to be a manager and deal with that stuff before you can ever even address what's happening with your external communication. And so not all expenditures are going to be the same, and they shouldn't be the same. Some things should be more important than others and ought to matter more than others. And figuring out what really does matter, guess what? That's your job as the service manager. Here's kind of what that looks like as they're talking about service quality spells profits. And it kind of puts together all this stuff. Now, we didn't talk about defensive marketing and offensive marketing. That's in chapter 16. But I think this chart kind of summarizes it pretty well. And that is the service you provide. Remember, it's much more profitable to retain customers than to have to attract new customers all the time because you're losing existing customers. It's much more profitable because you're spending less money, you get to know them better, you're building those relationships, you keep those customers. It's much easier to make money off of those folks. So you try to retain customers using defensive marketing, lowering costs, offering volume of purchases, price premiums, word of mouth. And then the offensive marketing is you're trying to increase your market share, you're trying to increase your reputation, you're trying to set the right price. Those strategies, as you're trying to retain your customers, lead to better margins at the top because, right, you're making more money, whether it's you're reducing cost or increasing revenue, both of those at the same time, hopefully. Down at the bottom, you're creating those relationships, you're using your reputation precedes you, so to speak. The price is set where it needs to be, and so your sales are up, and guess what? You are going to have higher profits. Now, this is a really simple diagram to explain a very complex process, and it really goes back to filling all four of those gaps that we've talked about. The whole book, in essence, if we look at the suggestions they offer, even small things will increase our profits simply by increasing the satisfaction that customers have and the service that we provide as they tell other people, as our reputation precedes us, as our brand becomes stronger, as we communicate better, as we have more resources to do so, our sales will increase. If we choose to not address those service quality issues, the statistics show us that not only are we going to lose money, we're going to lose more money than we might would first think. For instance, the lady that came to the vet office, how many hundreds of puppies will that vet never see because this lady was treated that way in the vet's office that day? She lost a lot of money on her. We'll continue to lose a lot of money on her. And that's one of the issues you face in the service industry, is that fine line with customers. And so I hope that this course has been somewhat profitable to you in regards to all these things. As we looked at chapters 14 through 16, again, these are the things that will be on the final. 100 points of your final will be from this particular lecture, chapters 14, 15, and 16. I'll have the study guide up hopefully Friday, so that you'll have time to do that. I'll try to tell you in class Thursday what time your final is. I believe that it's 10 o'clock Wednesday morning. Don't hold me to that. Need to make sure that we check that to be sure that's correct. But I believe that's when it is, and so should have the study guide up for you by Friday so that you'll have plenty of time to study. The other 100 points for the test will come from the case study that I gave you on the very first exam, and what I'm planning to do is just basically put that case on the study guide for you. And I'm going to expect you to go through these 4 provider gaps and be much more specific and offer much better suggestions for how to improve service performance in that company. You guys have studied this stuff now. You've made application in your group projects. And so I'm expecting more from you. And that's where the other 100 points of your test will be. So in essence, you're looking at 25 points for each one of those provider gaps. And that's what I'm going to be looking for in that case study, is kind of looking at each one of those provider gaps and what you've done and what you've said and suggestions you make for lessening that gap. All right, guys, I have really enjoyed this class. I hope that you have. Appreciate your work in it, and hope that in the future I'll be able to do more with you guys, to see you more, and really appreciate all the work, like I said, that you put into it. Hope that you have a great finish to the semester, and this class has been beneficial for you somehow, some way. All right. You guys take care, and I will see you very soon.